be seated. Yes, Mr. Davis, I see you're up. Can you'd like to address the court?
I would. I was just hoping to give you a second to settle in. I don't mean to preempt you like that. Your Honor, I hate to ask this question of you, but I have some witness issues as far as asking them when to be where at what time. And as a consequence, I was just wondering if you had a better insight about your availability for next week, or whether it's going to have to.
I have been in contact and by email with Mike Talley, the head of the court administration. He's trying to arrange for another judge to take my week in Cherokee County next week in general sessions. He and I are supposed to talk about that during the lunch break today. I'll be able to tell you more when I talk to him.
Great, I appreciate it.
He believes, his preliminary opinion is that he believes he can have somebody who can take that week for me when I stay here.
Great.
He has not made that commitment.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else before we resume the deposition?
Not from us, Your Honor.
All right. You may proceed.
Thank you.
What value would appraisal courses have for a sitting county council member?
The county council is ultimately responsible for the assessment process as it relates to reassessment. And the county council appoints the Board of Assessing Appeals, which council member appoints as members, including Thompson. And of course, county councils are actively involved with the passage of a county budget. And often county council members do not understand the way revenues are determined as it relates to property tax and millage and vehicles versus homes. And this would be, I felt these classes would be good for him in that regard when we talked about it. But he's primarily, it would be good for him as a council member. But in addition to that, and my thoughts about putting him into purchasing is that, replacing him, transferring to purchasing, is that the county is actively involved in acquiring rights of ways for sewer construction, road construction, or just buying property in general for the county needs. We had no one in the purchasing department that really had experience there, and often we have to rely on outside sources, such as private contractors, to assist us with perhaps estimating what something would be worth at times. And we needed someone that was experienced in that area. And I think a lot of that would stem from the issue that we had to contend with concerning the Beaver Dam Creek project, and lots of others to come along with that. So the training would have been helpful for him in the purchasing department.
Who is Adrian Hicks?
It's Adrian's married name. She was the buyer that was promoted to the assistant purchasing director.
Was she in the buyer two position?
I believe she was, yes.
Was that the position that ultimately you intended to transfer Michael Thompson into?
Yes.
In August of 2008, did Michael Thompson inquire to you about the purchasing manager job?
Yes.
Did Adrian Hicks, now Williams, get promoted into the purchasing manager job?
The assistant purchasing manager job, yes. Right.
At the time when Mr. Thompson's appraisal courses were pre-approved, Had you determined that he would be transferring into the buyer two position?
Yeah.
Was Michael Thompson's job transfer part of some sort of quid pro quo deal that you had with him in exchange for your vote in favor of your severance agreement?
No,
Did one thing have anything to do with the other?
no,
Did you ever have a conversation with Michael Thompson where you asked him to vote in favor of your severance agreement?
no,
That never happened, did it?
no.
Will you look back at Exhibit 2 for me? Was the lawsuit that you filed against Bob Waldrop and Cindy Wilson primarily about how they were interfering with your supervisory role of county employees?
Yes.
Is that what the items that are listed in your affidavit are intended to discuss?
Yes.
Are these intended to be an exhaustive list of how Robert Waldrop or Cindy Wilson interfered with your duties as the county administrator?
Not an exhaustive list, it was other.
Right. Your lawsuit relates to how they interfered with your supervising employees, correct?
Right.
Your affidavit supports that motion, right?
Correct.
You were asked about a lawsuit involving an individual named Stansel. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Was Cindy Wilson originally a defendant in that lawsuit?
She became a defendant.
When you say she became a defendant, what do you mean?
After depositions were taken from Stansel and Lovelace, and she became a defendant. She was named.
What did Stansel and or Lovelace say that prompted you to add Cindy Wilson as a defendant?
Well, that their information about the garbage company, where they got the information about the garbage company purchasing my car, came from her at some of those meetings they were at, or she was having.
Did you ever happen to learn additional information about who ran the plates on your car in that lawsuit?
Yes.
Who ran them?
I believe the town of Williamson ran them a few times, several times. DNR, Department of Natural Resources, and the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department, I believe.
During discovery, did you learn any additional information about the facts and circumstances under which the town of Williamson ran your plates in that lawsuit?
Yes.
What were those factors?
I was in Washington, D.C., and at that time my wife called me and said another lady had called our home and wanted to speak to me because she had some information that she wanted to share with me concerning this lawsuit. And she wanted to talk to me, and so I just called my lawyer, had my lawyer contact her, and that lady informed the attorney that she was Robert Stansel's sister-in-law, and she had witnessed meetings where he participated, and where he would, where he said that I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but where he had paid for a prostitute in order to perform sexual favors on a Williamston dispatcher, or with a Williamston dispatcher, so that Williamston dispatcher would run my tag for him and get information concerning the ownership of my BMW.
Was Cindy Wilson involved in those meetings?
I understand that she was.
your attention back real briefly to the instance where you testified that you asked for advice from the county attorney about Cindy Wilson's travel reimbursements on a specific occasion. Do you remember that?
Yes.
To your knowledge, was Cindy Wilson ever reprimanded by the Ethics Commission in relation to that travel?
Yes.
That concludes the excerpt that we wanted to play, Your Honor. At this point, I would offer to hand up the original transcript from which those excerpts came.
Any objections to that we put in the record? With the objections that you've already noted, and I have not ruled on.
Yes, sir.
Reserved. All right, so we admitted with those objections reserved. County, you call us in.
At this time, the county is going to call Kelly Nichols. I believe she should be here with us.
Mr. Studd, Mr. Studney. Come forward, man, to the senator, and be sworn, please.
If I could ask you to raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give the court today in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
If you would take a stand and state your name and spell your last name for the record, please.
Nichols, Nichols.
You can be seated, ma'am. Your witness, Mr. Preston.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Ms. Nichols. Thank you for being here. Can you tell the court where you currently live?
I live in Anderson County.
And were you born and raised in Anderson County?
Yes, sir.
Did you spend any time away from Anderson County?
Yes, sir. I lived on St. Simon's Island, Georgia,
For about what period of time?
around 97 to 99 to 2000.
And are you married?
Yes, sir, I am.
How long have you been married?
16 years.
Do you have any children?
Yes, sir, I do.
What are their ages?
13 and 10.
Tell us, if you would, your educational background.
I have a year at Anderson University, and I had 2 years at Tri-County Tech.
And what did you study at those two schools?
When I was in Anderson, I studied art, and when I went to Tri-County Tech, I was in the nursing program.
And what did you do for work after you completed your studies?
I went into retail management, women's apparel.
And where were you working? In the Anderson area?
Yes, sir.
Did you work for any particular company or stores?
I worked for mostly the limited corporation stores like Lerner at the time and Express.
When did you first meet Joey Preston?
I met him around 2002, 2003.
Did you recall what the circumstances were that led you to meet Mr. Preston?
Yes, sir. I was with a friend of mine. Her name was Jenny Carruthers, who is the ex-daughter-in-law of Marshall Carruthers. And we walked into Sullivan's one evening after her and I and some other girlfriends had been out, and we ran into him there.
At that point in time, did you know?
Davis,
Just for purposes of the record, I know we filed some of this ground yesterday, but just want to make sure that I record preservation. We are obviously kept for relevance purposes, for purposes, for improper impeachment purposes. This testimony has no impact or relationship to the severance.
I note your objection, however, I am going to ask, I assume you're objecting to any questions concerning her personal relationship with your client? Yes, is that your objection? I'll note that those objections are continuing to this line of testimony. And again, you're challenging that evidence. It will be considered challenged, and I will rule on that later. So that evidence will be presented in the form of proffer. I believe that I was told in our discussions that perhaps there's other evidence this witness may be offering. So if there's objections to that information, you need to make those objections specific.
I will do that.
Okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do you understand where we are, Mr. Tester?
Yes, sir.
Do you need any clarification on that point?
I think I'm okay with it.
Okay, you may proceed.
Ms. Nichols, at the time you first met Mr. Preston, it sounds like you were at Sullivan's with some friends. What happened that night?
Jeannie and I sat down at the bar and we were having a drink, and Mr. Preston was standing with us and we were talking, and Jeannie brought up to him that I was looking for a job because at the time I had just had a baby and I was trying to get out of retail because it was long hours. And of course, it kind of angered me that she did that because that's not why I was there. I wasn't there to talk with Mr. Preston about a job. So we continued to talk about that, and he ultimately asked me to get him a resume, and of course I didn't have one on hand, so I made arrangements to get him one at a later time.
And did you follow up with Mr. Preston in a resume?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did ultimately Mr. Preston hire you to come work for Anderson County?
Yes, sir.
When was that approximately?
That was around 2003,
And
early, or
okay.
later of 2002. My years are,
Okay.
they run close together, yeah.
So it sounds like sometime in late 2002 or early 2003, you were hired by Mr. Preston to work for Anderson County.
Yes.
In what job were you hired?
I was originally hired, I was given an intern position, which was part-time, working with economic development under John Lummis.
And did you ever move into any other jobs within Anderson County?
Yes, sir, I did.
Tell us how that came about. What was the next position you held within Anderson County?
I was with economic development for a short period of time, and I got a call from Mr. Preston, and he said he was taking me out of economic development and putting me in Keep America Beautiful, where I was working under Michelle Strange. So I began working with Keep America Beautiful in the fall of 2002, late 2002.
And was that position with Keep America Beautiful also a part-time position?
Yes, it was.
At some point, were you moved into a full-time job?
Yes, sir.
How did that come about?
It came to me through Mr. Preston. He communicated to me that there was a full-time position coming open in Building and Codes. They were looking for a mobile home inspector in that department. So I applied, and other people applied as well, and I was ultimately chosen for the job.
And do you know if Mr. Preston had involvement in your hiring into the Building and Codes job?
I don't know, right offhand if he had anything to do with it. I know Jeff Ricketson was the director of planning who was over that department, and he and Jeff Ricketson were really good friends.
And how did you find out about the full-time job that was available in Building and Codes?
Mr. Preston told me.
What experience or training did you have to prepare you for a job in the Building and Codes department?
None whatsoever until I got the job and I got on the job training for that position.
Did you know about how long you stayed in the job in the Building and Codes department?
I was there from March of 2003 till 2006.
And then what happened at that point in time?
In 2006, Mr. Preston notified me that there was a position coming open in stormwater because stormwater was a new program that was getting ready to start up in Anderson County. And I applied for that.
Okay.
And ultimately got that position.
Did you know who hired you into the stormwater department?
It would have been Vic Carpenter at the time. He was over that department.
But you learned about the job availability from Mr. Preston?
Yes, sir.
What were you supposed to do within the stormwater division?
Well, when I first started, it wasn't quite clear what I was to do because the department had not really become a department yet. So they ultimately just started me working with the wastewater department, which was already a developed department, because wastewater deals as close proximity to what I was going to be dealing with, so they put me with them, and I worked under them, under their guidelines, until my department came up.
So would it be fair to say you were the only person that was working in stormwater when you were first hired?
There was David Scott, who was an engineer in that department at the time, and he was in charge of stormwater as it was at that point. So I wouldn't say I was the only one, but I was the only one that had been hired specifically for that.
And what was your title when you first started in the stormwater department?
I was just a stormwater inspector.
And were there any other stormwater inspectors?
No, sir.
What experience or training did you have to prepare you to be a stormwater inspector for Anderson County?
Well, I had some compliance background working through building and codes, dealing with and working with land use. So I knew the proper way to install certain BMPs, which is best management practices with stormwater, like the silt fence that you see on construction sites. So I had some knowledge of how that was to be installed. So that was pretty much all I had at that time.
And once you got the job as a stormwater inspector, did you get any training or certification that would apply to your work in the stormwater department?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what was that?
I went through the Clemson extension and went to classes and became certified.
And once you got your certification, did you get a pay raise?
I did.
Do you know who was responsible for your pay raise? The decision to give you a pay raise?
Vic Carpenter would have been the one to have to sign off on the PAF.
Okay. And did your job classification or title change in any way once you got your certification?
Yes, it did.
How so?
I became lead stormwater inspector.
And as lead stormwater inspector, were you in charge of supervising any other stormwater inspectors?
No, sir.
Were there any other stormwater?
No, sir.
Do you know who made the decision to change your title to lead stormwater inspector?
To my knowledge, Mr. Preston was.
Was the job of building and codes and the job in stormwater were both full-time jobs?
Yes, sir.
Was Mr. Preston your supervisor within the county at any point in time?
No, sir.
Was he the boss of your supervisor?
Yes, sir.
Was it that direct in terms of you had a boss and then that boss's boss? Was Mr.
There was a chain of command, yes.
And Mr. Preston was one step removed from you in the chain of command?
I would say there was maybe, at one time there was only one person between him and I, and then it soon became two people between him and I.
Were you assigned other jobs or responsibilities within Anderson County where you did have to report directly to Mr. Preston?
Yes, I was in charge of a certain department when we started the balloon festival, and because I was involved in that, I did have to communicate with him directly.
And what responsibilities did you have in connection with the Anderson Balloon Festival event?
I was in charge of the VIP area, which was an area of service for the guests or the people that came to perform at the balloon festivals.
And did you report directly to Mr. Preston about that assignment?
At times, yes.
And what did you have to do as part of that assignment? What did you actually do with respect
I
to
had-
the festival?
I had to set up who was going to do the catering of the event, and I dealt with the entertainment. I was the one that helped with them some.
And did you have to attend the event itself?
Yes, sir.
And did Mr. Preston attend the event with you?
He was always present.
Bro, I mean, at some point, are we gonna talk about the severance agreement in this case?
Let's move on to something that I would consider relevant. I have yet to hear that. I'll sustain that objection as to the line of question.
How would you describe, I'm sorry, Your Honor, how would you describe your relationship with Mr. Preston when you first started working with Anderson County?
We were friends.
And did you socialize with him after work?
Yes, sir.
Did you and Mr. Preston socialize with Mr. McAbee and Amy Plummer at any point in time?
Yes, sir.
At some point, did you begin a romantic relationship with Mr. Preston?
Yes, sir.
About when did that start?
Around 2004,
And it continued until when?
late May of 2012.
And was Mr. Preston married during that time?
Yes.
And so were you?
I was too, yes, sir.
How close would you describe your relationship with Mr. Preston during that time?
Very close.
Did you, in your job at the stormwater department, did you have reason to travel to seminars or conferences related to stormwater management?
Yes, sir.
Did Mr. Preston ever travel to such conferences with you?
Yes, sir.
And were the expenses paid by the county?
Yes, sir.
And those happened after 2004?
Yes, sir.
Had Mr. Preston expressed any interest in going to stormwater conferences before you took the stormwater job?
No, sir.
In the fall of 2008, the county council voted to give Mr. Preston a severance package. And I was going to ask you, did you have any conversations with Mr. Preston leading up to the decision by county council to vote on his severance package in November 2008?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall what Mr. Preston told you about any communications he might have had with council members prior to that meeting?
I remember one specific conversation.
This is not only hearsay, but it's double hearsay, because she's been about to communicate what apparently Mr. Preston told her that some unidentified person told him.
That's a statement of the party opponent, Your Honor. Whatever Mr. Preston said is the statement of the party opponent.
Unfortunately for Mr. Tessier, it falls under Rule 805 and not under the normal hearsay rule. I mean, it's under 805, it's double hearsay, requiring exceptions under each level of hearsay. He's only identified one.
That's not the right application of the rule, Your
That's the
Honor.
absolutely right application of the rule.
Mr. Preston is a party opponent. There's no arguing that. So whatever Mr. Preston said.
Slow down just a minute, gentlemen. I'm not privy to what she's about to testify to, so I'm not sure exactly what she's going to say that he said, and whether that quotes someone else or someone else quoting someone else. So I'm not sure I understand what we're talking about.
But what I'll ask.
Can you tell me? I
Yes.
assume you know the answer to the
Yes.
question, or we've discussed it with her, so maybe you can share that with me, where we might be going.
Correct, sir. I was just going to ask her if she had conversations with Mr. Preston about any communications he had with those who voted for his severance package. She's going to say yes, and then she's going to relay what he told her about his communications. It's not offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted, Your Honor, but it's offered to rebut Mr. Preston's contention under oath that he never talked to anyone about this severance package or Mr. Cunningham's vote on his deal before the meeting happened.
So the second exception to the double layer of hearsay was what?
I'm not sure, is this quoting going to be quoting
I
what
don't-
someone told Mr. Preston?
I don't even know if it's going to be direct quote, Your Honor, as much as she's going to relay that he told her he had communications with them and knew what the vote was going to be. So
What we're gonna do is I'm gonna take a short recess. I'm gonna ask council to come to chambers. Be prepared to tell me what you expect the testimony to be, so that I can at least make a ruling based on what might be about to happen.
Yes, sir.
We're gonna take a short recess, we'll discuss it in chambers. Thank you very much. Ma'am, I'm gonna caution you, you're in the process of testifying while you're already under an order of sequestration. I will advise you, you should not discuss your testimony with anyone during the break. You understand?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, thank you very much. Court will be in recess briefly. Thank you very much. You be seated. Based on the responses as related to me in chambers, I'm going to overrule the objection at this point in time. However, you still have the right to object if responses warrant objection on the point that you raised. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. This next week, we were talking about the fall of 2008, November 2008 timeframe leading up to the county council vote on Mr. Preston's severance package. And I'll start the question again. To your knowledge, was Mr. Preston having phone conversations with county council members about his severance agreement prior to the November 18, 2008 meeting?
I don't know if it was phone conversations.
Do you know, to your knowledge, was Mr. Preston having conversations with county council members about his severance agreement prior to the November 18th meeting?
All I know is what he told me.
And what did he tell you?
He said to me in a conversation him and I were having on the phone, he was a little agitated, and he said that he didn't think he was going to have all the votes that he needed to, get the severance package. That they were having trouble with 2 council members buying into it, so to speak.
And that was in advance of the November 18th meeting?
Yes.
Did he ever relay to you any different assessment of whether he felt like he had enough votes?
No.
Did he ever tell you he thought he had enough votes?
No.
At any point in time, did Mr. Preston ever ask you to donate money to county council candidates?
There was one particular candidate, she was running against Miss Wilson. Her name was Julia Barnes. She worked for Forest College. And I wrote her a check for $100 and he reimbursed me for that.
Had he asked you to make that donation?
Yes.
Did Mr. Preston assist any other council members or folks who were running for council in their election campaigns that you know of?
No, sir.
Did you receive harassing letters about your relationship with Mr. Preston?
Yes, sir.
Did Mr. Preston receive some as well?
Yes, sir.
There was a SLED investigation about harassment that included harassment of you and Mr. Preston. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Did Mr. Preston ever ask you to lie about your relationship with him?
He said to me, we need to get our story straight.
Did he tell you anything about what might happen if you were caught?
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
He said that he would be fired and I would lose my job too.
Were you at Caters Lake with Mr. Preston on March 10th of 2006?
Yes, sir, I was.
Did anyone tell you to go to Caters Lake that night?
I got a call because I was on my way home and he told me to go there.
You mean a call from Mr. Preston?
Yes.
To your knowledge, was your presence at Caters Lake on March 10th, 2006 with Mr. Preston part of any operation by the Sheriff's Department to find people who were harassing you too?
No.
What happened the next day after you were seen at Caters Lake with Mr. Preston?
I was at home. I got a phone call from my husband. He was very upset. He had gotten a phone call from an anonymous caller saying that, of course, his wife, me, had been caught with Mr. Preston at Caters Lake the night before.
Did you talk to Mr. Preston about that?
I sure did. I immediately hung up with my husband and I called Mr. Preston.
What did he say?
He said, let me go. I need to call Tim Boucher.
Did you talk to Mr. Preston at all after that conversation?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He told me that he talked to Tim and that, yes, Kelly, it does appear that we were followed last night. And Tim Boucher said, as far as he's concerned, it was just part of the investigation.
Did Mr. Preston tell you anything you should do about talking about the incident at Caters Lake?
Yes, I was told a particular story I was to tell.
By Mr. Preston?
Yes.
And do you know if Mr. Preston and Chief Deputy Boucher appeared at a county council meeting later on to explain the Caters Lake incident?
Yes, sir, I am.
Do you know what they said?
They pretty much said that it was an operation to apprehend the people that were following and stalking us.
Objection.
Yes, sir, just for the record, I don't want to interrupt him, but I have to preserve my rights. Mr. President, and this whole line of questioning, which we talked about yesterday, we don't think this has anything to do with the severance package. Okay,
You've objected to the Caters Lake information, and I'm allowing it, and we'll move on that at a later time. That's the objection we preserved at the beginning of this testimony. I note that you again preserved the objection. I again reserve my ruling until a later time. This is being offered in the form of a proffer. You may proceed.
Yes, sir. I'm going to move on to another topic. Ms. Nichols, did you meet with Mr. Preston at the Holiday Inn Express on Highway 81 in Anderson during business hours on September 15, 2005?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you meet with him over a lunch break?
Yes, sir.
After you left the hotel that day, did you talk with Mr. Preston?
Yes, I did.
objection, relevance, I mean,
Roll.
Your Honor, I thought this was part of what we had discussed yesterday. We're happy to talk to you, change that you like about it. This goes to something again that Mr. Preston said in his deposition about what happened, and this is part of the credit card transaction that was investigated. Mr. McAfee talked about it. Ms. Wilson, he said Ms. Wilson gave this personal credit card information from a transaction. This was the transaction. An investigation happened relating to that.
The investigation, Your Honor, was into whether there was an improper disclosure of confidential credit card information by the county councilwoman. All this stuff was not part of the investigation.
And Mr. Preston, we submit Mr. Preston has lied under oath at least 2 times, including in this case, about what happened at that hotel on that particular day. And I think that's relevant going to his credibility. That's all.
Your Honor, I mean, at some point, this case has to be about the actual severance agreement that they've alleged in the complaint. And we object on relevance, we object on 403 grounds, we object on 404B grounds, we object on improper impeachment grounds, and we object on fair enterprises grounds. That, I mean, they're essentially trying to challenge the arbitrary and capriciousness of the vote by holiday inexpress credit card receipt transaction questioning. They're trying to turn this case into days of our lives.
Where has this been mentioned by anyone involved in the decision-making process of the severance agreement? I know earlier there was mentions in the notes by Mr. Bright of this particular relationship, but I don't recall anything mentioned by any of the people involved thus far concerning any credit card bills or those charges. Entering into the severance agreement decision.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone tried to tie the 2 together, Your Honor. I do know Mr. McAfee mentioned.
And I'm going to sustain the objection.
And
Move on to something else. If you want to make a proffer,
that's all I would ask to do, Your Honor. I'll make it very short one, just ask a few
let's
questions.
make it very short.
Before we proffer.
I will sustain the objection.
Ms. Nichols, did you set up do you know if the plan for using the Holiday Inn hotel room on September 15, 2005 originally involved any plan to allow Representative John Scott to spend the night there that evening?
Originally, no.
Did that plan change at some point
Yes,
based on Mr. Preston's conversation with you?
yes.
And have you seen the deposition transcript given by Mr. Preston in another case back in 2005 where Mr. Preston talked about the hotel room incident?
Your Honor?
This is just a proffer, Your Honor.
He's asking about a deposition transcript from another case? That's like 3 layers of hearsay.
Well, Your Honor, it's a proffer of his own deposition transcript that he gave to her.
Again, I'm going to sustain the objection. If you want to make a proffer, you have a right to make a proffer to preserve the record for appeal.
And that's all I'll do, Your Honor.
All right, then I sustain the objection.
Ms. Nichols, did you get a copy of that deposition transcript that I just mentioned?
Yes, I did.
And where did you get it from?
Mr. Preston?
And does he talk about the Holiday Inn incident?
Yes, he does.
And did you bring it, you have it with you, I was smart.
Yes.
Your Honor, what case is this from, by the way?
This is from the case involving Cindy Wilson and Mr. Preston. So there was reason why Mr. Preston would not want to tell the truth in that deposition, because the sitting county council member, Cindy Wilson, would then know what they had already suspected about his relationship with a subordinate.
Have you seen this deposition?
I haven't, and haven't been
Do you have
produced.
the passage you want to share with the council? So we can
Yes.
see what you're talking about?
Mr. Tesher, it would be page
Ma'am, don't
12.
answer anything until I rule on their objections. Thank you, please.
Your Honor, this hasn't been produced to us and discovered. And with this stuff at trial, it's more of the same, and we object. This should be struck from the record. They should be disallowed from going into any of this stuff. It's inadmissible under the rules. It's unfair under the procedural rules. It's just improper, and it's unsupporting altogether.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, sir, Mr. Tessier, have you provided them with a copy of this?
Your Honor, as Mr. Davis knows full well, he made a decision not to take the deposition of Ms. Nichols or to subpoena her for any
I
documents.
understand that, but I was suspected of discovery concerning documents to be used in trial. I would expect that question to have been asked in written discovery.
Yeah, we did not see this, Your Honor, until whatever night it was, Wednesday night, perhaps this week, when Ms. Nichols
Well,
showed
did you
us.
provide it to him then?
We didn't get a copy of it at that point in time, Your Honor. She was represented by
When
counsel.
did you get a copy of it?
I never got a copy of
Of
it.
that you're holding in your hand?
This is what she just brought today.
But he knew how to
How
ask
did
questions
you
about it.
know to ask questions about it?
Because I,
Well, Mr. Escher, be honest with the court about when you found this thing. And
Your Honor,
when you discovered it.
Wednesday night, I believe it was Wednesday night, when Mr. Byerholm was here as well. He's-
It may have been Tuesday night.
I don't like to see trial by ambush.
Well, again, Your Honor, in fairness, Mr. Davis could have deposed this witness from along the board. We talked to her Tuesday night. I mean,
Understand that, but you have a continuing obligation under written discovery, and when you learn of documents that are going to be used by you at trial, to provide those to the other side. That's my understanding of the way discovery works. You have a different understanding?
well, Your Honor, I think first it would have to be responsive to discovery and something that's in my possession, custody, or control. And I don't control the witness, so I can't force the witness to give me the documents. She's cooperating, We did not get a copy.
I've already ruled it inadmissible. And I'm gonna let you go into it solely for the purpose of the proffer, if you wish to make the proffer.
Well, I'll just make it a court exhibit if that's all right.
That'll be fine.
When's the last time you spoke with Mr. Preston?
Would have been in May of 2012.
And is your relationship with him over?
Yes, sir.
Would you agree with me that it's fair to say you're angry with Mr. Preston?
No, I'm not angry.
Are you upset with him in any way?
No, sir.
Are you on good terms with him now?
I don't speak to Mr. Preston now.
Would you make up stories to try to hurt Mr. Preston because of the past relationship you had with him?
No, I just want to tell the truth.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Your witness, Mr. Davis.
Good morning, Ms. Nichols. We had the pleasure of just meeting about 5 minutes ago, but I am playing as purposely ready. Before we go into things that we might disagree about, I was hoping maybe we could talk about some of the things that we might agree with. And it's true, is it not, that during the 2006-2007 time frame, someone, we don't know who necessarily, but someone was writing anonymous letters and signing your name.
There was one instance where that happened, yes, sir.
In fact, there was more than one instance.
Well, yeah, but it was all linked to the same instance. Yeah.
There was a letter that was sent actually to the Office of Disciplinary Counsel for the Supreme Court of South Carolina.
Yes.
And in that letter, this anonymous person made accusations about a lawyer that you hadn't even met yet.
No, I had not.
And the allegations that they made about that lawyer were false, right?
Right.
And you didn't even know that the letter had gone off to the South Carolina Office of Disciplinary Counsel until they responded to you at your address.
Correct.
And then there was another occasion in that same time period, that 06, 07 time period. And in that instance, they wrote a letter to Senator Billy Odell. Remember that?
Yes, sir.
And they wrote that letter anonymously in your name, and it contained false allegations too, didn't
Yes, it did.
For the record, I'm going to object as to relevant hearsay and lack of foundation. Nothing's been established that these are letters that Ms. Nichols actually sent to anyone. These are,
Well, he asked her if she didn't send it. And she admitted knowledge that she didn't send it.
so that goes to relevance. If we're talking about letters she never sent, it goes to relevance. Just for the record.
Relevance, Mr. Davis?
it? Well, we take this relationship issue and put off to the side for a second. Ms. Nichols is a very credible witness, about a pattern of harassment that both she and Mr. Preston were experiencing during this time period. And there's no doubt, I think that there's a lot that this witness and I can agree on, that this harassment that occurred, and it occurred systematically in different ways. It was unfair. It was targeted at her. It made her a target because of their suspicion of a relationship with Mr. Preston. And I think that it's going to link back to some of the council members if my examination goes down.
Well, I'm going to let you go forward. I'll let you go into the atmosphere in which this decision was made because of its relevance as to why people may have made decisions. Since a question has been raised as to whether or not the decision was arbitrary and capricious. So to the extent that this may be used to further establish the atmosphere in which the decision might have been made, I'll overrule the objection, allow you to go forward.
Thank you. Ms. Nichols, there was an instance too where there was a letter written to Senator Odell. So yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I thought you were just rephrasing the original question. I'm sorry.
And that, like that other letter that we looked at, that had false allegations in it too, and they signed your name on the bottom of it, right?
Correct.
And can you and I agree, Ms. Nichols, that in a civilized society, it's unacceptable to write letters to third parties and sign someone else's name and have those letters contain false allegations against yet another party? We can agree about that, right?
Yes, we can.
There was yet another instance, all the way to the spring of 2007. Do you remember where there was a letter written anonymously where they signed your name and it was sent to the Department of Justice? Remember that?
Yes.
And that letter contained false allegations against third parties. Remember that?
Yes.
And all of these letters were designed to try to cause you problems, weren't they?
It would appear that that would be the case, yes, sir.
And they were designed to cause you problems, and they were designed to cause Mr. Preston problems, right?
Right.
Ms. Nichols, you remember there was a woman, and I've never been clear on what her actual name is. Is it Gina or Jenna Trammell?
Jenna Trammell.
Jenna Trammell. And you remember Jenna Trammell, right?
Oh, very much so, yes, sir.
And one of the things that Jenna Trammell did was she stalked you, didn't she?
Yes, you did.
You go and you buy groceries and you look out your rearview mirror and Jenna Trammell would be following you.
No, that's not true.
Well, I mean, as an instance, you'd be looking out your rearview mirror and you'd see Jenna Trammell following you around. Right?
On one instance, yes, I saw that.
Was there an instance where you went to a Chinese restaurant?
That is the instance I'm talking about.
And on that occasion, do you remember that Deputy Chief Tim Boucher was actually following Jenna Trammell as well?
I wasn't aware that he was following her. I was aware she was following me, and I called him to come verify that she was sitting in the parking lot of the Chinese restaurant watching me while I was inside.
And you saw Jenna Trammell, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And did you ever become aware of any relationship that Jenna Trammell had with Cindy Wilson?
Yes, I did.
What was that relationship?
She lived in, from what I could understand or what I was told by Joey, that
This would be hearsay, connection, relationship, if there's any, and/or speculation.
I'll link it up to Mother later on.
That'll be fine. First question.
On the occasion that you were at the Chinese restaurant, and forgive me, but I can't remember the name of that restaurant. What was the name? It's something Wok, right?
Oh, Master's Walk.
That's wrong.
Yes.
Where is that exactly?
Well, it was in Pruitt, I think it was in Pruitt Shopping Center at the time, but it's now moved. It's next to Bojangles on Main Street.
Is the Pruitt Shopping Center in downtown Anderson Center?
It's further up north, just before you get to the mall. It's up in that direction.
It's in the city limits?
Mm-hmm.
You called Deputy Chief Tim Boucher to say Jenna Tran was following, right?
Yes, I did.
And Tim Boucher came out and he confirmed that, right?
Yes, sir, he did.
And in fact, when he came out, Deputy Chief Tim Boucher had Joey Preston in the car with him, didn't he?
I don't recall seeing Joey in the car, but he may have been.
Did you ever become aware of an instance where Jenna Trammell was or had a judgment entered against her for $10 million for defamation?
I just learned about that recently. I didn't until then. I didn't keep up with her.
There were instances where Deputy Chief Tim Boucher was actively investigating Jenna Trammell, were there not?
He was investigating her as part of the investigation because she was heavily involved with the stalking and what they suspected was the letter writing.
And there was an instance where Deputy Chief Boucher was attempting to get Jenna Trammell's fingerprints. Remember that?
Yes, sir.
And that was on a different night than the Chinese Walk restaurant night, right?
I think so, yes, sir.
And in that instance, Deputy Chief Tim Boucher actually met with Jenna Trammell at some point or someplace downtown in an effort to try to get her fingerprints so she can compare it to those harassing anonymous letters that you were having sent out under your name, right?
That's what I was told, yes, sir.
There was an instance when you were working for Anderson County, when you actually wrote a letter to the Anderson County Council. Remember that?
Yes, I do remember that.
And did it complain about a specific council member?
Miss Wilson.
And in your view, was that a warranted complaint?
Yes,
Why was it warranted?
because she was saying things that were not true about me.
And they were unfair, weren't they?
They were.
And they were defamatory, weren't
Yes, they were.
they? And you felt like you were being targeted.
Yes, I did.
And the reason why you were being targeted was because Miss Wilson was out to try to harm Preston in some way, right?
That was my perception.
Miss Wilson said things about you that were somewhat unconscionable, right? I mean, she questioned your ability to do your job.
That's correct.
And the truth is, you took a lot of pride in your job, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I loved my job.
And you worked really hard.
Yes, sir, I did.
And you were good at it.
Yes, sir, I was.
And for whatever reason, due to your relationship with Mr. Preston, or at the time, the suspected relationship, Ms. Wilson was targeting you and saying all sorts of things about you, right?
Yes, sir.
And she even went so far as to say those things about you on WAIM radio, didn't she?
I didn't personally hear it. I just heard that she had said those things.
There came a time while this was happening when you learned that she went on the radio and said these things about you.
Yes.
Didn't she accuse you of of wearing inappropriate clothing at work?
Yes.
The city county council member is accusing somebody who's working in the stormwater division of wearing inappropriate clothes to work, right?
Objection.
Correct.
Mr. Davis has complained plenty about the extent of questioning, and I see no bearing whatsoever on this particular line.
Your Honor.
We're getting a little far afield on
Yes, Your Honor, but remember, one of the things that the county has said in this case, which has been interesting, was that Mr. Preston did have a claim for liability during that period of time when he first asserted his claim on September 25th of 2008 up until the severance agreement. And that one of the things that we defend on is we've shown that there was a lawsuit that was filed against Bob Walker and the city of Wilson, and that one of Mr. Preston's primary job functions is to supervise employees. And we've also shown that there was a situation where the Anderson County Council subsequently ratified the behavior of those two as official conduct. And we've also shown that there was an order that was entered by the court that said that they did in fact interfere with that conduct. And now we have, for the first time, an employee in Anderson County at that time who is talking about actual specific instances that she's encountered wherein she had her job duties interfered with by the city and county council. And in fact, she was one of the people who was referenced in that lawsuit. So it's just going to establish the concreteness of those facts.
He's going to have to tie that in, Your Honor, because a lot of what he's asking, you'll notice, are questions about what did you hear so-and-so said? Did Ms.
Well,
Wilson?
if you want to object on hearsay, that's one thing, but you made an objection on relevance.
Yeah, and the other one would be lack of foundation. So if he wants to present evidence that she actually knows of direct contact between Ms. Wilson and her about complaining about her job, that's what he's trying to get at, it says, so let's have to do that. But you can't do it this backdoor way of saying, did you hear that Ms. Wilson might be complaining about how she wore to work?
Your Honor, I came through the front door. I asked her about the letter she wrote to the county council wherein she complained specifically about the city of Wilson.
Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection.
Get you some more?
I'm fine, thank you.
Here, you might hurt yourself.
Let's have to take a recess. Let's do this. May I approach the witness?
You may.
May I approach them?
Yes. Thank you.
Let's go at it a different way. Kelly, do you remember writing this letter?
Yes, I do.
Is that your signature or under sincerely?
Yes.
In this letter, in the second sentence, you state, and I quote, I respectfully request that you take whatever steps you can to stop one of your members, Ms. Cindy Wilson, from continuing to make false and slanderous statements about me, end quote. Do you see that?
Yes.
Was that statement true?
Yes.
In the next paragraph, you state, and I quote, Ms. Wilson has made false and slanderous statements about me in a letter to you, and I personally heard it being read on the WAIM morning radio show by Mr. Rick Driver, who is a known supporter of Ms. Wilson, end quote. Was that statement true?
As I said before, I did not hear it. Can I say something? Can I explain?
You have the right to explain any answer you give me.
This letter was written for me, and I had to retype it. Okay? I did not write this letter.
Did you put in your own words?
No, I did not. I retyped it word for word by what it was given to me.
Was it false?
I didn't hear it on WAIM. That part would be false. I was given this letter to sign and to send.
Did you agree to send a false letter?
No, I did not agree. I did this because I was told to do this.
But it contains things that are false.
The part about WAIM in this letter, I did not hear it. But everything else is true.
Everything else is true. Okay.
But I wrote this letter, I signed this letter because I was told to.
But the contents of the letter is true.
Except for the part where I heard it on WAIM.
And then down below, there's parts about Ms. Wilson having attacked your moral character by saying that the sheriff's department is investigating. Was that true?
She did.
Down below it says Ms. Wilson's statements are defamatory and she's intentionally trying to hurt me. Was that true?
Yes, that was true.
At some point, Kelly, you filed a motion for a restraining order against Gina Trammell.
Yes, I did.
And in so doing, you submitted an affidavit with the court.
Yes, I did.
And that affidavit outlined various facts about how Ms. Trammell had systematically harassed you and followed you, right?
Yes.
There was another instance of harassment too, wasn't there? There was a guy named Turk Culbertson.
Yes, that was the most recent one
And that was all the way up.
from 2006.
Yeah. And then the restraining order you filed in that case was in 2011, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there were instances where you would see Turk Culbertson literally just creep in front of your house in his car.
Yes, sir.
And while he was doing that, he would come out and he would stare at you in a weird way.
Yes, sir.
And that happened with a fair amount of frequency, didn't it?
Yes, sir, it did.
And at some point during that process, you filed a report, as you should have.
Yes, sir.
With the Anderson County Sheriff's Department. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
And before you even got that report back as the victim, the next morning, you heard Rick Driver talking about it on WAIM radio, didn't you?
I don't recall hearing it myself because I was usually at work doing my job when they were on the air, but someone would ultimately call me and tell me that that was the case, yes.
And in fact, that very next day, after you filed that police report, Mr. Culbertson went on the radio himself and was talking about it, as you understood.
That's what I was told, yes.
Now, I want to turn your attention to Cater's Lake. And I want to try to see, in the same kind of vein, what we could agree about that night. And maybe there may be stuff we disagree about, but that's okay. I just do what we can agree about. that night occurred on March 10th of 2006?
Yes.
I assume that cross-examination is a subject to your prior objections.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
I'll make that notation when we proceed.
That night, do you remember going to Sullivan's?
Yes, sir.
When you were at Sullivan's, you were there and Mr. Preston were there.
Yes, sir.
And there was a lady named Marlene McLean. Remember Marlene McLean?
Yes.
And then Marlene McLean had a couple friends with her too. Remember that?
Yes, sir.
And did you at some point become aware that Marlene McLean was actually the underling to Tim Boucher? Did you know that?
No.
Did you at some point that evening learn that Tim Boucher was expected to come out to Sullivan?
No. Joey told me that he was going to try to, but he didn't know if he was going to get there or not.
But you remember Joey telling you that Tim Boucher was going to try to come out there that night, right?
That's what I said, yes.
At some point while you were at Sullivan's with that group, somebody mentioned Gina Trammell to you. Remember that?
Yes.
And understandably, the reference to Gina Trammell.
Just this.
Okay, thank you, go ahead.
In the way this person was presenting to you was somewhat upsetting, right?
Yes.
Because Gina Trammell was stalking. And
She was a bad person.
And then here's this person at Sullivan's trying to tell you, Gina Trammell's so great, and you weren't going to listen to that.
No, I wasn't.
And so the consequence of that dialogue was that you left. You got up and left. You were mad. You got up and
I
left.
said my piece and I got up and left, yes.
And then Joey stayed there for a short time with Marlene McLean.
Yes.
And after you had left for about 10 or 15 minutes, you phoned Joey. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And Joey then left himself. And,
Yes.
and he met up with you somewhere down around the courthouse area in Anderson, right?
No.
Where did you meet up with you?
I didn't meet up with him at any time once I left. I was in my car. I was driving down Main Street. I turned down right to go down Granville Street, and he called me.
And then did he come at some point and follow you?
Yes, he was behind me somewhere.
And then at some point, the decision was made to turn left on 81 into Caters Lake Park.
He told me to go there, so I did.
Now, just let's clear something up for purposes of the record, so that the radio crowd doesn't have a field day with you. Nothing sexual happened in the park that night.
No, sir.
We can agree about that.
Very much so.
When you arrived at the park that night, you and Mr. Preston were out of your vehicles and went down to a pretty well-lit area. Is that right?
We sat in his car for a little while and listened to James Bond music and laughed. Then-
How romantic.
Yes. And then we shortly got out of his vehicle and walked down to the edge of the lake.
And then after a short time, the Anderson City Police showed up, right? With the blue lights flashing.
I don't recall seeing the blue lights, I just remember seeing the spotlight on us.
And then you walked back to your vehicles and you both just exited out of Caters Lake Park.
Yes.
Now, it's true that at a later point in time, you learned why the Anderson City Police Department showed up here that night. Did you not?
I had a feeling as soon as it happened, what had happened, yes.
And what had happened was that there were two little kids who were following all around, and they reported a false police report against that there was noise in the park that night.
I can assume they were following, but I don't know that they were.
And did you later learn that after you left Gators Lake and y'all went on your separate ways, did you later learn that the girl of that couple had phoned Mr. Preston's home that night?
I did not know that until much later that she had phoned. To be honest with you, I actually didn't know that she had phoned him until quite some time after it had happened, because he did not tell me that she had called.
At some point afterwards, you found that out.
Yes.
And she not only called once, she called twice. Right?
That's what the report says, yes.
And one of the things that was communicated to Mr. Preston was that this whole Gators Lake scandal was going to be on the radio the next morning, right?
Yes.
And in fact, it was it not?
Yes.
And the girl who,
Well, it wasn't the next morning. That was on a Friday night. They didn't broadcast on the weekends, so that would have been the following Monday.
the next broadcast.
Yes.
That's a fair statement. That girl turned out to be of the name Amanda Felton.
Correct.
She had a husband named Michael Felton.
Correct.
And Amanda Felton's father is a guy named Jerry George Welsh.
Correct.
Jerry George Welsh is a friend of Cindy Wilson's.
Objection, Your Honor, lack of foundation.
Do you know whether
And ask whether she knows that or not.
Do you know whether Jerry George Welsh is a friend of Cindy?
I know that they were acquaintances.
Now this lawsuit's been going on for several years. You were aware of that, right?
Yes, sir.
And it's also true that during the pendency of this lawsuit, you hadn't spoken to the attorneys from the counties until September 19th of 2012. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And that was the first time you voluntarily came forward, right?
Yes.
And it also turns out that September 19th of 2012 was the very night before the special meeting that the county council had called to vote on Mr. Preston's severance, or settlement.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Goes to potential motives, goes to timing,
Potential motives of who?
witness.
Heard. Address objections to me. Don't pump them on yourselves about it. Thank you. Relevance.
Your Honor, I'm just trying to establish that there was a several-year period of time, and that none of the information that she shared with us today was voluntarily shared during that. The first time that it was shared was on September 19th of 2012.
Okay, you got that into the record. Anything else? You have the right to inquire because on direct, there were questions concerning her motivation to testify and whether or not her purposes or whether or not she was here because she was mad at somebody. That's been raised in direct. You can go into those things, but That's what the county council met, might have been doing when she came forward, unless you can connect the two somehow.
Well, what I wanted to ask her,
Then I'll be glad to hear you, but I haven't heard that yet, so let's,
when you met,
you can go into remote to testify. They brought that up.
when you met with the attorneys for the county on September 19th, 2012, you were aware that the settlement proposal of Mr. Preston was slated to be voted on the following meeting.
No, I was not aware of that.
Your relationship with Mr. Preston ended in June of 2012? Is that right?
June 1st.
Your employment with Anderson County ended in August?
Yes. End of July.
Now, at that point in time, you had been in a relationship with Mr. Preston for nearly 8 years.
Yes, I would say 8 years.
And there had to be some reason why you stayed together for 8 years. And when the relationship ended, it was emotional for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'd say it was pretty emotional for both of us.
On direct examination, you referenced job. Your first job was as an intern, but then you went to work for Keep America Beautiful,
Yes, sir.
and then you went to the Building and Codes Department.
Yes, sir.
And it's true, is it not, that Jeff Rickinson would have been the person who was responsible for your hiring?
Yes, ultimately, yes.
And when you then proceeded to transfer to the Stormwater Department, similar to the Building and Codes Department, in that instance, it was Vic Carpenter who hired you.
Yes.
On direct examination, I thought you said that you believed that there was only one and sometimes two people between you and Mr. Preston on the chain of command.
Yes.
And I suspect that it might be that there may be layers in there that you just forgot about. But isn't it that there was Mr. Preston, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there would have been Michael Cunningham beneath him.
Okay, yeah.
And then there would have been Vic Carpenter, right?
Yes.
And then there was some guy named John whose last name I can't remember, but you probably do.
Well, there was, when I started with Stormwater, there was David Scott. He later quit. So there was nobody between Greg Smith was over the department. So between Joey and I would have been Michael Cunningham and Vic Carpenter. But then it later became Greg Smith because Vic Carpenter quit. So there was about 2 to 3 people between me and Mr. Preston.
And then did you work with an engineer in those projects too?
With the stormwater? Yes, later on we did hire a plan reviewer who had an engineering background, and I worked with him.
Now, on direct examination, turning your attention to the 7th Street and stuff specifically, You testified that Mr. Preston told you that he was having trouble with 2 council members?
Yes.
Is that what he said?
He said he actually told me who they were. We can't get this person and this person to buy into it.
And did he say he was having trouble with them, or he said he didn't know whether they were giving votes, or he wasn't sure about it?
He said we're having trouble getting them to buy into it, is what he said.
And what point in time was
I would say it was right in the middle of all of the negotiating that was going on at that time. I wasn't that familiar with that process, so I didn't know what all that entailed. All I learned was from him.
this? And do you know what he meant by that?
I'm just that they couldn't agree on it.
And you can't tell me in the process when this occurred?
No, because there was a period of time between the time they started negotiating and talking about it and then the end of when they actually voted on it. It was in November.
And this lawsuit has been pending since 2009.
Correct.
And the first time you came forward with this information was in September 19th, 2012.
Objection, Your Honor, by the foundation. Witness was available.
Can you answer that question? Go ahead.
And the first time you came forward with this information was on September 19th of 2012.
Yeah, because I was told to sit down and keep my mouth shut and don't say a word.
And you came forward voluntarily, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you met with the attorneys for the county, right?
Yes, I did.
And you met with them in the Anderson County Courthouse.
With Mr. Tesher and Mr. Gentry. No, I did not meet with them in the Anderson County Courthouse.
Well, where'd you meet them?
I met with them in Greenville at their office.
So you voluntarily went all the way up to Greenville to their office?
Yes, I did. They asked me to because they were going to depose me.
And previously, they had had you under subpoena, correct?
They had served me last December, and I had not heard anything back. And I did contact them later to ask them what was going on.
And they served you with the subpoena last December, and you didn't have any contact with them until you voluntarily came forward on September 19th of 2012, right?
That's correct.
And your testimony is that you had no idea that the following night there was going to be a vote on Mr. Preston's settlement.
I did not. I didn't keep up with that. I wasn't in the know.
Ms. Nichols, I am sorry that you have found yourself in such a position. I appreciate you being here today. Thank you.
You're right. Yes, sir.
Ms. Nichols, Mr. Davis asked you a lot of questions about why it took you so long to come forward voluntarily and talk. And you said you were told to sit down, and keep your mouth shut, and not to say a word. Who told you that?
I was told that quite often by Mr. Preston.
And we tried to take your deposition, or served you a notice and a subpoena to take your deposition back in, I think it was December of 2011.
December the 2nd.
At that time, were you represented by counsel with respect to your deposition?
At the time when it started, no, I was concerned about it, and Joey decided to get his attorney, Candy, to represent me if and when that deposition took place.
And did Ms. Candy Kernfuller, who's seated with Mr. Preston here today as co-counsel, did she represent you with respect to the deposition we were trying to take with you?
If it was going to happen, yes, she was going to be the one to sit with me.
And that representation continued through at least June of 2012, right?
Correct.
And so Ms. Candy Kernfuller, co-counsel for Mr. Preston, had full access to you as a witness that entire time through June of 2012, right?
Yes, sir.
Had full access to every single document that you have with respect to Mr. Preston, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, most of the documents you have with respect to Mr. Preston came from Mr. Preston.
Yes, sir.
So when council talks about not getting documents with respect to you, they had full access to those documents, didn't
Yes,
they?
they did.
At the time of Caters Lake incident in March of 2006, your affair with Mr. Preston was ongoing. Fair to
Yes,
say?
it was.
And Mr. Preston was your ultimate boss at that time. Fair to say?
He was the one on the highest point, yes.
And would you agree that Mr. Preston's having an affair with a subordinate county employee put the county at risk?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for a legal conclusion of the lay witness is clearly incorrect.
I can state what her belief might have been as to those things. Overruled. I'm not sure this is in response to anything that came up new on cross, however. This is redirect. If we're beating the same horse, let's move on.
Well, I just need to hit a couple things that were covered by Mr. Davis.
I'd like for you to get to that.
Well, he talked a lot, Your Honor, about Cindy Wilson being interested in what Mr. Kelly Nichols was up to. And wouldn't you agree?
I on that. The Caters Lake thing's been covered fairly thoroughly, and I don't remember anything new that was brought up by his cross-examination. If there is something, point it out, let's move on, but other than that,
At Caters Lake,
let's don't beat the same horse.
at Caters Lake, Ms. Nichols, you talked about what you did with Mr. Preston. Would you agree with me that you were upset at that time because of what had happened at Sullivan?
Yeah, I wasn't angry. I wasn't really upset, just kind of angry.
And would you agree that Mr. Preston put his arms around you at the park
Yes,
and he kissed you?
yes, he did.
Do you think he would have kissed you if you were being observed as part of an undercover investigation?
No, I do not.
And Mr. Preston told you the story you were supposed to use with respect to that incident, right?
Yes, sir.
What was the story you were supposed to use?
That we were under a sting operation and Mr. Boucher was somewhere sitting up in the parking lot at the church that is directly behind Caters Lake.
Did you have any knowledge as to whether or not that was actually true?
No, I did not.
You talked about Defendant's Exhibit 76, which you may still have in front of you. It's a letter.
Yes,
And you indicated that you did not write that letter yourself. Is that fair?
I did not write that letter.
Who wrote the letter for you?
If I remember correctly, Mr. Preston said he had Michael Cunningham write the letter for me. They sent the letter to me. I retyped it and signed it.
And who told you to send the letter to the county council, that is Defendant's Exhibit 76?
Mr. Preston.
Was that something you had thought to do on your own?
No, sir.
Was Gina Trammell a county employee at any point in time that you know of?
No, I do not believe she was.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you very much.
Recross.
Just two things. It is true, is it not, Billy, that the reason why the letter was drafted on your behalf to submit to county council is because you were being harassed and defamed by county councilwoman Wilson? That's true, right?
I was being harassed, yes.
You were being
This is
defamed.
something I wouldn't have done on my own.
But it was an effort to protect you, wasn't it?
I guess, yeah.
Thank you.
You messed that down.
You're on one thing, because it looks.
Okay.
May I move Exhibit 76 into the record? I think I forgot.
We object, Your Honor. Hearsay,
The letter was written by her, but it
She
was signed.
acknowledged her signature on it, and she sent it, so you come in.
and we're just asking that this witness be excused from
Any
subpoena.
objection to her being
None, Your Honor.
Ma'am, you're free to go. I will remind you that I have issued a sequestration order. In this case, you are not to discuss your testimony with anyone until such time as this case has been ended. Thank you very much.